Coming up on The World Today, Belarus sprinter given Polish humanitarian visa after refusing to return home. UK and Iran summon diplomats after tanker attack. Plus, Delta variant-driven COVID outbreak in China spreads to more locations, raising concerns. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers, a sprinter from Belarus who refused her team's order to fly home early from the Olympics has been granted a humanitarian visa by Poland. 24-year-old Krystyna Tymanovskaya is at the Polish embassy in Tokyo after spending the night secured in a hotel under protection from Japanese police. She says she was forcibly taken to the airport for criticizing coaches and voiced fears for her safety. Belarus says she was removed from the team because of her emotional state.
That the Belarusian sprinter is safe and secure after she refused to board what she said was a forced flight home from Tokyo the night before. Krystyna Tymanovskaya sought help from Japanese police at Haneda Airport, where she says she was taken against her wishes. She says she does not plan on ever returning to her home country. And she might not have to. Both Poland and the Czech Republic have now offered visas to the athlete.
The first step is to give her a humanitarian visa. Then when that would be her decision to apply for an asylum or international protection, then we'll start the whole procedure. But at this very moment, she is she's at the Polish embassy, safe and in a quite good condition, although the whole situation, of course, had a quite negative footprint on her.
The IOC spokesperson, Mark Adams, say they were able to speak to her directly.
The IOC in Tokyo 2020 will continue their conversations with her and the Japanese authorities to determine the next step in the upcoming days. We're talking again to her this morning to understand what those next steps could be, what she wants to pursue, and we will give her support in that decision.
The 24-year-old was due to compete in the women's 200 meters on Monday. She said coaching staff had come to her room on Sunday and told her to pack and was taken to the airport. The Belarusian Olympic Committee said coaches withdrew her from the Games on doctors' advice about her emotional psychological state. But the athlete's refusal to return to Belarus highlights ongoing discord in the former Soviet state, which has seen more than a year of nationwide protest under President Alexander Lukashenko. In March, the IOS refused to recognize the election of Lukashenko's son, Viktor, as head of the country's Olympic Committee. Both father and son were banned from attending the Games in December.
The UK and Iran have summoned each other's diplomats in a row over last week's deadly attack on an oil tanker off the coast of Oman. The UK, US and Israel blame Iran for the attack in which two crew members, a Briton and a Romanian, were killed. Tensions are high between Israel and Iran, and each has regularly accused the other of targeting shipping in the region. Iran has dismissed accusations that it was behind the latest attack as baseless. But UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says Iran must face up to consequences of what he calls the outrageous ship attack.
I think that Iran should face up to the consequences of what they've done, accept that the attribution that the Foreign Secretary has made, this was clearly an unacceptable and outrageous attack on commercial shipping. A UK national died. It is absolutely vital that Iran and every other country respects the freedoms of navigation around the world, and the UK will continue to insist on that.
Some update on the COVID-19 pandemic now. Chinese authorities are rushing to trace and control the country's first widespread appearance of the Delta variant as its worst coronavirus outbreak in more than a year spreads to at least 14 provinces. Over the past 24 hours, the National Health Commission reported 55 locally transmitted symptomatic infections, taking the total number of infections linked with a cluster found last month in Nanjing, the capital of eastern Jiangsu province, to more than 250.
The Chinese government has imposed fresh travel restrictions and is testing millions as a fresh COVID outbreak spreads to more locations, raising concerns in local media over the country's vulnerability to the highly contagious Delta variant. More than 300 cases have been detected within a span of 10 days. Cases first emerged in July in Nanjing airport amongst workers who'd cleaned a plane that arrived from Russia. In Hong Kong, city leader Carrie Lam says unvaccinated Hong Kong government employees as well as education and health workers will soon have to pay for regular COVID tests, announcing measures to persuade more people to get vaccinated.
There is simply no room for complacency, despite the fact that we have achieved 0 local confirmed cases for 56 days. Because Hong Kong is a very well-connected international city. So the world around us is facing this challenge of another major rebound, as you can see from the 7-day moving average that I have shown you. So with that in mind, if we start to relax or to open our borders without subjecting passengers arriving Hong Kong to any quarantine, that we are putting the whole community at risk.
Hong Kong has registered 56 days without any local coronavirus cases, and life has largely returned to normal in the global financial hub, except heavy travel restrictions remain in place, with hotel quarantine required for all arrivals. Vietnam has extended strict curbs on movement in its business hub, Ho Chi Minh City, and another 18 cities and provinces throughout its south for another 2 weeks to help combat its worst COVID outbreak. After successfully containing the virus for much of the pandemic, Vietnam is facing a rapid spread of infections that has led to movement restrictions in around 1/3 of the country. It has registered a total of 145,000 cases and 1,306 deaths, 85% of which were recorded over the past month. Army patrols have hit the streets of Sydney to help enforce coronavirus curbs as Australia struggles to stop the Delta variant from spreading. Along with delivering essential food items to households in self-isolation, some 300 Army personnel who will be unarmed and under police command will go door to door to ensure people who've tested positive are isolating at their homes.
They will be working right across Sydney. No one suburb will be targeted. There will be ADF personnel deployed alongside police right across the city. The personnel, the ADF, will also be working in supportive roles to ensure that meals are delivered, to ensure that the police are supported in areas where they can then redeploy their assets to ensure compliances across the city are maintained and met.
Sydney, Australia's largest city, is into its 6th week of a lockdown as it struggles with a spike in infections that added nearly 3,500 cases since the first one was detected in a limousine driver who transported overseas airline crew.
In the meantime, passengers have been arriving in the UK after rules changed to allow people fully vaccinated in the US and EU to avoid quarantine. The change, which came in at 4 a.m., affects those arriving from countries on the UK's amber list, except for France. The UK government says the change would help to reunite family and friends whose loved ones live abroad.
Well, our son, daughter-in-law and our grandson...
Lion Cat joins us now. Juliana, good day for families that haven't seen each other in a long time, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, Jocker. It's been pretty emotional, some emotional scenes at different airports across the UK after what's been a very tumultuous 18 months. As you can imagine, the British media have been camped. outside airport terminals, seeing loved ones arrive from far-flung places in the US and different countries in Europe after, from 4 a.m. on Monday morning, the quarantine rules changed. So if you're now travelling from within the EU as well as Switzerland and some other European countries as well as America, you can travel to Britain without quarantining. Previously, you could only be excluded from quarantine if you had been vaccinated in the UK and you were travelling from an amber listed country. I know it may sound very slow and convoluted, and that's because it is. The UK travel list has been full of controversy and complications, but for today, especially for those families that haven't seen their loved ones, who have missed funerals, graduation ceremonies, births, today was pretty emotional, yes.
So not everyone is happy, though. French travellers, I hear, heading to the United Kingdom are still required to go into quarantine for 10 days. Why has France been excluded from this list?
Not everyone is happy, and it's not just France. This is a much wider conversation, Jocket, about the UK's travel list system, which came into place on May the 17th. France, at the moment, though, there have been discussions in Whitehall that suggest that France will be removed from the amber watch list, which is another category of the traffic light system, because there have been a rise in cases of the beta variant of coronavirus. The government have been on the strong side of caution and decided to put anybody travelling from France onto the amber watch list, which means you have to self-isolate. But again, as I said, this is part of a much wider discussion about the travel quarantine system. We are in August. There are just a couple of weeks left for the beleaguered aviation industry to try and claw back billions of pounds of lost earnings. And there are discussions about what's going to happen with the traffic light system. It was, first of all, just green, which means you don't have to quarantine. Amber, which means you can travel there, but you have to self-isolate. And red, which means you have to quarantine at a mandatory British hotel at a cost of £1,800 per person. Obviously, lots of people took advantage of this. Many people were travelling, trying to save their summer. But because of this increase in travel, there has been an increase in positive COVID infections. So the government, therefore, decided to add an amber watch list, which meant if you were double vaccinated, you still had to quarantine. And now there are discussions that perhaps lots of countries will be put on another list, which means you will have to quarantine in a mandatory hotel. There has been lots of backlash. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is under pressure, especially from Heathrow bosses. In fact, even the Chancellor Rishi Sunak wrote a letter to the Prime Minister over the weekend saying that we are just far beneath our competitors when it comes to opening up our borders. So yes, lots of people are disgruntled. We're expecting an update from the Transport Minister, Grant Shapps, on Thursday. There's just a couple of weeks left for the summer, and Jockey, you know the weather's not really great in Britain, so thousands, in fact probably millions of British holiday makers are hoping they can get away without having to pay an extra, £10,000 to quarantine, or having to miss out on lost earnings because they're having to self-isolate at home.
Right, thank you. Our London correspondent Juliana Olayinka speaking to us there. Still to come on the program. Greece sees the worst heat wave in decades. That's in a moment. Welcome back to The World Today. Afghan President Ashraf Ghani has blamed Afghanistan's fast deteriorating security situation on a sudden decision by the United States to withdraw its troops, but says his government has a plan to bring conditions under control within 6 months. Taliban insurgents have moved in on 3 provincial capitals in the last few days amid rapid advances nationwide since Washington said it planned a complete withdrawal of troops by September. However, the Afghan government says it has a security plan to bring the situation under control, and the United States supported the plan. Peace talks between the Afghan government and Taliban negotiators started last year in the Qatari capital of Doha, but have not made any substantive progress despite a few rounds. The two sides committed to speeding up the talks, however, at a recent meeting in Doha between a high-level Afghan political delegation and the Taliban. Security analyst David Otto joins us now for more on this. David, good to see you.
Thank you.
So the Afghan president has spoken, presenting some sort of security plan. Is there anything new in what he said? And what would you have liked to hear from him that could change the narrative in the country and challenge the Taliban?
I think, first of all, Ashraf Ghani began by, as you rightly mentioned, blaming the US President Joe Biden for the withdrawal tactics. And then he then talked about a US plan or US-backed plan with Afghanistan to deal with the Taliban. So there's a bit of a controversy there, if indeed there is a plan which has been backed by the US. First of all, Afghan government had complained that they were not told about the withdrawal timing that the US did. So again, it depends on what they are trying to do here. Again, the vice president did mention that Afghanistan was going to deploy what they called a national resilience movement. It's more like a community and village by village strategy. What we saw sometime in Nigeria, I think you remember that, with the Civilian Joint Task Force. What they're saying is they want to get the people. It's a people-centric approach. Every village should back the government and fight against the Taliban. That to them is one of the plans which, they've said any village that does that will be backed up by the Afghanistan National Defense and Security Forces. So I think that is one of their plans. Maybe the other plan, which, they're talking about, is the fact that the US has promised to supply them with maintenance of their, Air Force, which is, they use a lot of the Super Tucano fighter jet, the similar jet that was supplied to the Nigerian government as well. So they are hoping that the US is going to help them to service these planes. But the US has made it very clear that it would only do that out of Afghanistan. So I hope to see, whether there's anything further than this. But, the maintenance of Air Force, the ground troops, also intelligence-led operations, that should be something which the Afghan government should be able to do. But the Taliban has taken most of the country hostage. They are using what you call the outside-inside strategy, taking most of the rural areas and then approaching to the urban centers. That is quite suffocating for the current government of Afghanistan.
Right, so, as you said, fighting has been raging in several parts of key cities in the country. In your assessment, how serious is the Afghan gains in the country over the past few days?
Well, the difference between a government and an insurgency is that, the insurgency have more time. Remember, the Taliban has been fighting for the past 20 years. The Afghan government doesn't have as much time as they do. So even when the Afghan government, succeeds to recover some territory, out of the 85% or 70%, depending on which statistics you believe in, that the Taliban has been able to take from the districts, from the 400 districts of Afghanistan, it's just a matter of time. And the ongoing peace talks are not helping matters, as you mentioned. Talks have been held in Qatar, in Doha, and, it does seem as if, the Taliban is not buying into that. About 15 foreign missions, including the US, the UK, Japan, the Five Eyes, Australia, Germany. They pledged during the fasting period of the Eid al-Adha that the Taliban should declare a ceasefire. They didn't declare a ceasefire. They continued with their, land grab. And when they were accused of carrying out an attack on that day, they blamed it on the Islamic State. Remember that they didn't talk about Al-Qaeda, because there's so much concern that the Taliban is working hand in gloves with Al-Qaeda. So it's a very complex situation, and I don't see how much time that the Afghan government has before it loses, most of, if not all, the territory to the Taliban.
September next month is the deadline for full withdrawal by the U.S. How optimistic are you for peace in the region? And do you think this pullout is being a bit rushed?
Well, I think, what has happened is the Afghan government has been depending a lot on the protection that has been given to it for the past 20 years by the U.S. government. Now the U.S. has pulled out. Now this day was supposed to come. It had to come. The Afghan government did not prepare for it. Of course, they are saying the U.S. left abruptly. 95% of the withdrawal by the U.S. has already been achieved. I doubt if there are still any forces there. And even if there are, they are not being used, to protect the Afghan government. The security situation is quite concerning. I don't know, not just in the Middle East, but also in African countries. I remember in the early 2000s, the first movement in Nigeria that began to terrorize the government was called itself the Taliban, or what they call the Nigerian Taliban then, before they then metamorphosed into, what we know as Boko Haram today. So the impact of the Taliban returning back to power, still working hand in gloves with Al-Qaeda, and with the presence of ISIS in that region, and we've got an Islamic State movement in the entire Africa, I think it's a major concern, not just for the regional states of Pakistan, India, or Iran, but for everyone, and mostly for Africa, which is more vulnerable and a soft landing for most of these jihadist movements. But I hope that help will come to the Afghanistan government, but I doubt it that we'll see any such help coming in.
Right, thank you for your thoughts. David Otto speaking to us there from London.
Thank you.
Finally, temperatures have soared across Greece as the worst heat wave in decades pushes the power system to its limits, and Greeks and tourists head to fountains and beaches to cool down, with the weather service forecasting temperatures in the capital as high as 44 Celsius this week. Energy authorities have warned that power demand will skyrocket, testing the capacity of an electricity grid already burdened by more than 3 million holidaymakers during the summer tourist season.
The weather is terrible. It's very hot, very, very, very special hot. And the Acropolis is beautiful. It's special. I come back in the winter time. In the summer?
It's horrible. We're from Houston, Texas, and this is hotter. This is hotter than Houston, Texas. This is horrendous, simply put.
Well, that's it on The World Today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Jokia Rogers.